So it's hot boy summer in Afghanistan, and the Taliban is having the time of their life.
Hello, humans. Welcome to Thanks, Donald Joe Biden. This is episode 30 of your Power Report, and I am Dan from the internet. 30 episodes in. Political Report, the first iteration of Power Report, started January 2020, and then we rebranded this Power Report in August of 2020. So, not necessarily been a year, but it's definitely been a momentous occasion as we're just ramping up Power Report again. I want to appreciate all of y'all who have been writing for the longest, all of y'all who are new and getting started on the Power Report bandwagon. Appreciate you very much, and I want to get started with a really great episode here. I was really upset, not only with the tragic images coming out of Afghanistan as Kabul and a lot of other major territories within Afghanistan fell to the Taliban recently, like I said, in mid-August as we're talking. Those weren't the only upsetting things to me in this. It was very terrible, but the media narratives and the way that the people we have in our society who are supposed to be the experts, who are supposed to dissect this information with the most care and concern and craft, were just being the most lackadaisical, lazy, and misinformative when it came to the Afghanistan situation. I'm talking people on MSNBC, I'm talking people on CNN, and Fox News, of course, that it's always going to happen, there's misinformation there. But there was a particular brand of racism and nonsense along with the misinformation there that I think is worthy of going into, especially as this Afghanistan situation is very delicate. Some say it goes back longer than just Joe Biden's administration. Some say it may go back 20 years. Some say it goes back significantly longer into the Cold War. And I think all those answers are correct. The point is you need to have the proper context when surrounding the topic of Afghanistan and coming out, ending our involvement in the region there and what that really means, whether or not that's good or bad. What is the significance of that considering the past decades of what we've been doing? And so, like I said, we have a really good Power Report plan for you today. First, I wanted to talk to someone who is really close to the ground, to the situation there. And so I was able to find
Arash Azizzada, and I'm a community organizer.
Arash did a really excellent job of providing us historical context, understanding of the situation today, doing all the things that mainstream media really fails to do. And a lot of independent media is also dropping the ball on as well. So I was absolutely grateful to have that conversation, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But later in the show, we're also going to have Bam, regular Power Report crew member, coming up on the show to discuss kind of the media narrative, like we said, dissecting where the American media got things wrong and what the narrative should be. Even though these are the people who are setting the narrative themselves. They're talking about how bad this will be for Joe Biden, how this will be perceived, when they're the ones who are perceiving it and they're the ones whose cues will be taken from. So if they perceive it in the right way and dissect it with the proper context and analysis, as we will do on Power Report here, then you'll actually have a real sense and understanding of the gravity of the issue, how tough of a decision Joe Biden had to make here, and how I, as a leftist, as someone who doesn't like defending the Democratic Party, has a very strong not a very strong defense, but I have to give Joe Biden props for doing something that George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump were all too cowardly to do. And largely this is George W. Bush's mess. But this is all the intersections of media and the political apparatus of American culture. That's all here. That's all in the Afghanistan story. And so I'm really excited to get through to it all. Really fast links. Check out powerreport.world. That's a website. That's a URL you can type into your browser and you'll get the links to everything we're doing, all the podcasts, episodes of the podcast. You can listen to them on the go if you don't want to watch them on video, or if you do want to watch them on video in beautiful 4K, you can at youtube.com/Dan from the internet. Posting full episodes there. Those are the priority. We'll get clips going up very soon. But also keep up with us on social media, Power Report WRLD. That's Power Report WRLD on Twitter. Power Report World minus the O. And then powerreport.world on Instagram. Powerreport.world on Instagram. It's a lot, but check the description of the video or the description of the podcast and you'll find all the links. So later on the show, we'll have a conversation with Bam. Starting right now, we're going to have that conversation with Arash. It's all Afghanistan, and we're going to do this damn conversation right. Thank you very much for joining me. Let's get in. Thank you, Arash, very much for joining me on such short notice. I just really wanted to get, as I do on PowerPort, there's a lot of perspectives in the media about news. Most of those perspectives are wrong. I wanted to get the right perspectives. And so thank you very much for joining me on here. And I know episodes like this, it's a very like somber time. I know you probably have like yourself or folks who are like very connected to the situation in Afghanistan. So I kind of want to start off by asking how you're feeling, how you've been processing the events of the past week, and how things have continued to progress. Like, where's your head at right now?
I'm an emotional guy, but there's no emotional processing to be done this week. Like I'm kind of laser focused on assisting my community, being as much help as I can, uncovering like every connection that I've ever made, and utilizing that to try to like evacuate people. And I'm doing that. Friends are doing that. Every single Afghan that I know is doing that. Every person in our community is trying to do that right now. So like, I don't really have time to reflect on my emotions like that. And there's like little shades of that here and there, but it doesn't matter right now. Like it is zero importance how I feel right now. And that's the kind of like moment we find ourselves in.
Because it's just, you don't have time. I'm getting from you, like, you don't have time to process right now. There's so many tangible things need to be done, getting people out of the country safely, making sure people are in contact with loved ones and things like that. Like, you sort of have to focus on that, like kind of an all adrenaline mode, right? So that's helpful context to give people like a mindset to how people are going into it. I think because sometimes people have a lot of emotions and thoughts that are going into it. Other times, like, you're in the thick of it and I kind of have to deal with it later. But at least like when you're talking to friends, colleagues, like to some extent, there's some people you certainly can't process these things with because they won't understand. And there's some people who will like have a glimmer, a little bit more of an understanding, right? Like, where are like y'all's head at, like some of your feelings other than like the obvious?
I mean, it's like, there are like little times and like bits and pieces of like where like things kind of slow down because I'm so like laser focused on attempting to like figure out like I not only am I trying to get folks out, and at the same time I'm trying to push our policymakers to like do the right thing. And like everybody in our community in the diaspora especially is assisting with that in some type of way. But also people are feeling like hopeless, right? Like, so like people feeling hopeless and sad and like getting people on the phone, and it's like very obvious that they've been crying or that they're deeply sad and deeply worried, like it's a sad time, I think, to be an Afghan, but it should also be a sad time to be an American. But at the same time, it's like there's so many tasks I think at hand, and like I'm trying to move mountains in a way, to try to figure out like, how do I get my boy out? Like that's at the core of this, like, and people are doing that for their friends, their family, for like people they deeply care about, and so like the emotions are pushed back in a sense, and I'm trying to figure out like during the few minutes of downtime that I have, it's like I'm like anticipating how I will feel eventually. I'm like, I think I'm gonna be pissed, like I think this is a radicalizing moment, and I was already radicalized last summer and then also like before that a few times. But like, yeah, I think I'm like ready for the transformation into personally to be like, okay, how deeply hurt and angry will I be once this like calms down a little bit?
That's a really deep introspection about it, because you eventually, even when you are in those adrenaline packed moments, speaking from some aspect of experience, but absolutely not what you're dealing with right now currently. It's, it's coming, like, it's inevitably there. You're not like delaying anything, like something is inevitable, but it's still very much there's somewhat of an anticipation of how extreme or how much intensely you're going to have that feeling, those feelings of regret or resentment or like anger or passion, just however that sort of manifests, right? But I guess sort of going out of the shrink portion of this segment and going more into like what is like kind of taken place during the past week. I think if you could, to the best of your ability, it doesn't need to be like, you know, in the most colloquial kind of fashion, give the audience a sense of like, a lot of people are coming in, they saw the footage of like chaos at the airport in Kabul. They understood that like, okay, within a very rapid period, the Taliban had taken over like major cities. But beyond that, I think people don't necessarily understand what's even gone on in the past couple of months since Joe Biden announced that America would be pulling out of Afghanistan by the fall, by around this time, or anything even afterwards, because it's been so bastardized in our media. So like, if you were to catch someone up in good faith, just like to begin them on what's happened, and I'm specifically putting a timeline to maybe say earlier this year with Joe Biden announcing pulling out of Afghanistan to today, like how would you bring them along that process?
The U.S. finalized pulling the plug on the Imperial Project, and they're ready to move on to the next stage of the Imperial Project. Might look like sanctions or some kind of like aid package, however they want to fashion it. But it was done with doing what it was doing. And it has spent the last few months and like since it came into power realizing that sorry, the United States does not care about black or brown people. It certainly does not care about black and brown people thousands and thousands of miles away. And at the end, we saw the culmination of that in these past few months. I think the United States did a variety of things that it could have done obviously differently. But for me, the past year wasn't as important as it was the past 45, you know, like I think really you do have to give it context. And the United States started its project in Afghanistan. And like it does this in a variety of countries. For the US has just become very, it's made like Afghanistan, it's kind of like bastard child to some degree, or it's like the US is like Afghanistan's like abusive father. Like it comes in the 70s and 80s and then it leaves and abandons, and then it comes back and says, hey baby, I've changed. And that's really how I kind of look at it. It's like, no, like I'm the good guy here. And even like right now you see it's like trying to leave. And it's like, it's just like, it's deeply abusive, man. This is what an abusive relationship looks like. It's like, and this last grasp of like trying to help people. Like I hate that we as a community have to like call our Congress people right now and be like, keep the airport open. So actually send more soldiers. Like help me evacuate the people that I love and care about. I think that's a deeply frustrating mental experience. But the way I would summarize it best for folks who want to like realize like what happened in this like especially during the past few months of the Biden administration, is that the U.S. just carelessly did what it does, which is walk away when it wants to on its own terms. It didn't even consult its allies. Like the U.S. does what it wants, and it's never held accountable. But it creates a lot of harm, a lot of pain, a lot of misery, and the Afghan people will suffer.
Before I want to take a moment to get serious, and actually the rest of this episode to get very serious about this, but for a moment, I want to get to the big question in American media, because there's only one of like three ways American media can interpret this. Is this Biden's fault or not? Yes or no?
That's actually a good question. I think no. Like it's like if like the Biden administration refuses in the next 48 hours, in the next 5 days to not grant Afghans a safe haven and refuge, then he owns that. And he was certainly like, an entire population will hold that against them. And hopefully folks who are friends and our allies and collaborators will do the same. And it's not his fault. This is not, he didn't start this. He's just the last chapter of this book of the the neo-colonial project that the U.S. started in in Afghanistan. This withdrawal was just like executed as badly as the occupation, with no regard for Afghan people. It didn't listen to us. It didn't care for us. It never prioritized for us. It lied to us. Then like also at the same time, it like made us promises and broke those, and like real people suffer, man. And it feels deeply personal. Real people are fucking suffering. And that is really what is at stake here. But this is like a bipartisan thing for the last 4 administrations. And like, if you want to go back to 1975, like, I'm not good at math, but that's a lot of presidents. That's a lot of administrations. That's a lot of like different Congresses who all agreed that like the policy towards Afghanistan was to like disregard any like human life. They didn't care what was going to happen. In the 70s and 80s, it was still like counter to Soviets. In the 90s, it pretended we didn't exist, except for like when Bin Laden like struck U.S. targets, and like the U.S. threw us a few missiles our way, and then it started caring. Like this is just, and this is also not the end chapter, unfortunately. So. There's a lot of history there that I think is like relevant and gives today in this past week context.
Yeah, and I want to go into my sort of like provocative statement there of like, is it Joe Biden's fault or not? Because I agree with you. I agree with you pretty much all the way that Joe Biden has just decided to be the person who's decided to make this end on his watch. Like the Iraq, like as we're about to go into, like I think the entire boondoggle of the America intervening in the Middle East is just like a complete mess. The idea of this country in an imperial way seeing different territories as just like proxies in this Soviet like Cold War battle is gross historically in retrospect. And the fact that America does this sort of like wipes its hands clean, loving the new mic deal, wipes its hand clean approach with the with its foreign policy as it's moving between administration and administration. Like I think the most American thing about that is like, every 4 years, administrations come and administrations go, but the disregard for people, the suffering that's happening on the ground, the lack of consultation with the people who would be most affected with any given decision being made by the imperial state basically not being resolved. I mean, honestly, that's the most American thing about this. That's like, by proxy, that's just the American spirit. That's how you exist even inside the country. And of course, I'm still being very glib here because it's the only way I can deal with these dark situations. But like, it goes to show that some of the things you can relate to with how little it seems that America cares about people internally is like it's what people could aspire to abroad, honestly, because it's much worse, because then you have the military involved, you have these proxies involved, you have all these other different entities there. And so now's the fun part. Now I can stop putting on this character and say, I'd like to get into the history now. Where would you begin in the American imperial project as it turns its sights towards Afghanistan? And basically, to the extent that you want us to take us up to the year 2001, because that's a space odyssey in downtown New York City, if you will.
Yeah, and actually the like U.S.-Afghan like dynamic and relationship is quite interesting, I think. But USAID, invests a lot of money into this project-specific one, and there's like a variety of books that folks should read. But one of the better ones is from Anand Gopal, and there's another book by this Washington Post reader called Little America. And in Little America, it talks about this USAID. It goes back to like the 50s or 60s, and there's a modernization project going on, and like Afghanistan is this like it's just conservative place that is just like not maybe like necessarily catching on with the way the rest of the world is evolving, because frankly, who cares? Like people are just humans and they live. But in Little America, it talks about this USAID project. Obviously it's like backed by the king at the time. But they take people from different ethnicities and they put them in this like one place, very unorganic and very like unsophisticated approach. It's like people of different tribes should be able to like live together and procreate, and like we're gonna make this one village and everyone's gonna get along, and that's how we force modernization on Afghan people, because they're backwards and they're like they're unsophisticated. And that's where I kind of trace back like a lot of like the US's policy, where it's like it seems harmless, USAID money that goes to a certain place very far away, and like it's like probably helps also build them wells and things like that, right? And then we like the story of that specific like village is like it totally fell apart. It didn't work. It's not organic. You try to force this thing on people, but it was US backed, and then you go back to the 70s, where like the US is helping heat up this proxy like war of ideologies and ideas. Even that, it's like we're spreading democracy through like promotion of X, Y, and Z. And I think like violence can look at a variety of different ways, right? Like it's invasion and occupation is a very clear way of showcasing violence. But in the 70s, like if you sponsor books that are inflammatory towards Soviets and communists, and like you're trying to like make Afghanistan a participant, a party to a conflict, right? And that's exactly what happens. Eventually, the Soviets invade, and also like to be quite fair, like the history is written as if it was just the Soviet Union, and the history of that is a little bit more complicated. Like the U.S. and Soviet Union are both imperial empires. They're both at fault here. The Soviet Union did tremendous damage. And actually, the way you would evaluate the two occupations by those two different countries, they both failed, right? And like, there's like this whole thing about graveyard of the empires, and that shit is bullshit. But the Russians invade, and they take this like scorched earth approach. They just try to destroy villages. They try to beat the Afghans into submission, and like fails, right? But at an extremely high cost. This is why this is like great, like. Anybody that like dares to use that like graveyards, quote unquote, or graveyards of empires, like quote, is going to get punched in their throat, and deservedly so, because it's so played out. Like the cost of that phrase is millions and millions of people. The cost of that phrase is me living in Los Angeles rather than in Afghanistan. And so the Soviet Union kind of like invades Afghanistan, spends 10 years, obviously fails. The US partakes in this proxy war, sends Stinger missiles, and uses Pakistan as like, and specifically the Afghan people to engage in this proxy war. The Soviet Union withdraws. The communist-backed government falls in 92. By 96, in 94, there's this massive civil war. So during the Soviet invasion, Kabul is spared somehow. Like none of the fighting really reaches there. It remains this like cosmopolitan city. Fighting does happen, but it doesn't get destroyed. In 94, these like warlords and different groups destroy the capital, and just like it's in rubbles. Nothing is left. It's inhabitable. 96, by that time, the communist-backed president Najibullah has stepped down. But he's hung in 96 by the Taliban in this like main square. The Taliban takes control. Also decides to host Osama bin Laden, who gets kicked out of Sudan. And in 98, obviously, there's the U.S. coal attack and the embassy attacks, and a few cruise missiles that are lobbed towards Afghanistan. And all of a sudden, like we care for a second. And I remember America's reaction was like, it was like the Clinton affair. It wasn't even that we were like sending missiles to Afghanistan. It was like, he's trying to distract from the Lewinsky affair. And then I think 9/11 happens, but 9/11 happens on September 9th for the Afghan people specifically. Ahmad Shah Massoud is like renowned warlord, and we can unpack that later, because no warlord should be like acclaimed and seen as a hero. But Afghans are always like, and I think every like society is like that. We're all clamoring for somebody to look up to, for somebody who fights for us. And Ahmad Shah Massoud is that for a lot of Afghans, and definitely not a majority. We're not a homogenous group of people by any means. but Al Qaeda assassinates Ahmad Shah Massoud on September 9th, and then on September 11th, the U.S. is attacked both in Washington D.C. And I think that's where like one part of my journey in this entire story is like it starts. But yeah, that's how we get to almost modern day Afghanistan and the occupation. I think that lasts a surprising 20 years.
Yeah, I'd never gotten even the perspective because I'm even on like the older end of like the Zoomer side of things. I was very, very much a child when 9/11 happened. Not super, very slightly aware of it, just in the sense that like I knew that the adults were acting kind of weird that day, but like truly no context of it, not even to even know that like, or to have anyone properly explain, because America has such a shitty educational system, that there were events that were happening in the months in the lead up to like 9/11, for example, that were, you know, like directly responsible. Like these things don't happen in a vacuum. You would live in America and just think, you know, Bush was having a merry time, a lackadaisical day, and then all of a sudden everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Like that's honestly how a lot of people think of things. And I don't mean to condescend, because there's also a lot of propaganda that people are fed at an early age and are just now coming around to, and I want to allow a space for those folks to do that. But at least in this case now, with that context, we all know what happened during 9/11. Don't need you to go through that. Like, but there was a lot of confusion, I think, with like who done it. And there was a lot of smoke up in the air, and there was a lot of opportunity for the American like imperial machine to crank up for the new millennium. So what are some of the, like, go into some of the, to the extent that you can, the lead up of America and getting involved in Afghanistan, and first of all deciding like Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, all these other different like surrounding things to deal with as well. But what ended up making it so America decided, oh, we now are basically nannying this country here, and we have to take care of it for like their own good, but also like for our own interests. This paternalistic kind of thing you were describing earlier.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about that too, because like for me, 9/11 was, I was 14 years old. And by the way, I moved to the US August of 2001, just for some context. For
Oh, wow. The same time that Bush got that memo that said Bin Laden determined to strike inside the United States and decided to do dick about it. That was a good month. That and...
That
awesome.
was in sync. So yeah, I mean, and that was in Northern Virginia when 9/11 happens, you know. So like I'm in the 8th grade, and like folks are crying because their parents work in the Pentagon, which is like, what a weird first or second week I spent in the 8th grade here in the United States.
Middle school is never fun for anyone, but try that.
Certainly it was not fun in the months after that, my friend. Like just like also like trying to learn a new language. It's like a lot of anthrax jokes for sure. Yeah, the anthrax jokes rank towards the top there. But I think the US just like 9/11, like just like it was an opportunity for the US to get its swagger back. It was like, we have a big dick, we're gonna swing it. Somebody punches us in the face. Look what we're gonna do. Like, I'm gonna fucking destroy you. And it goes to Afghanistan, right? Like it backs these like repressive, also not like the Taliban, but like abusive and like regressive warlords. It takes over Taliban. People play music, right? And like gives everybody the impression that progress has been made. Well, yeah, progress has been made when like the US is ranked like towards the poorest country at the world, like with like Sudan, I think, like at the rock bottom, like in the late 90s. Like the Taliban is not recognized by anybody. Like nobody even engages. The Taliban has no power. It's recognized by like the UAE, Saudis, obviously, and obviously Pakistan. the U.S. like invades Afghanistan, teams up with these guys, like bombs the Taliban out into submission rather quickly, refuses their offer for like surrender, essentially, which is essentially back channel to the U.S. And the U.S. is like, "No, we're gonna bomb you." You know, it's like when somebody tries to shake your hand after punching you, and is like, "Hey, like I give up," and the U.S. is like, "No, you're not gonna give up. We're gonna kick your ass." That's essentially what happens. But there's a quick like knockout round. The Taliban kind of disappears. It refuses, and this is where the Anand Gopal book comes into recommendation. The U.S. ends up just being like, okay, the enemy has been defeated and they fled. You know, like they chase bin Laden to Tora Bora. They don't really commit enough forces to even catch him, right? Like it's just a mountainous, challenging territory. And so the U.S. kind of like looks around and is like, okay, who's our enemy? Like the Taliban has disappeared, and Taliban signals to like their people in Pakistan, they're like, don't even fundraise for us. This is it, and they give up. And for like between 2001, like this, like January of 2001 or 2002, and like sometime in 2003, the Taliban doesn't even exist. You know, like in any even formal or informal way. And the U.S. ends up getting like kind of duped by their local partners and like some Afghan Americans, actually, these businessmen and these like local strong men in different regions. They eventually like snitch on each other and say, hey, like this opponent of mine, this business opponent, this person I don't like is actually Al Qaeda and Taliban. And this is how like rivalries in Afghanistan are settled. There's this like powerful force with a lot of like military might. And so the U.S. ends up killing a bunch of just like people who are obviously not Al Qaeda and probably are to some degrees bad guys, but it has no business doing that on behalf of like, you know, the war on terror. And so it ends up like creating this huge dissatisfaction with the occupation, right? Like this invasion and then like violence.
I'll just pause there and say it's an expansion, a very predictable expansion of what they're supposed to be there in the first place. Because it's like, okay, you can almost say like, okay, U.S. hates the Taliban. A lot of the Afghan people like don't like the Taliban. Like, okay, maybe there can be like some, let's make a deal here, right? But it very much encroaches beyond that and goes into what you can view externally as like America's like vendetta parade. And definitely, at least internally in the United States, was sort of like Bush, Cheney, the entire like neoconservative movement at the time, trying to gain and cement legitimacy on the world stage, not only for political power. In fact, very much so, the political apparatus they tried to leave behind was very weak. It was more so the apparatus they left behind that was very strong was the corporate apparatuses, all the Halliburton drives and things like that you had that were set up there. So yeah, like not to completely cut you off there for what you're going for, because you're like in a good point there, but it goes to show that America, what it ended up doing there, and in response was a gross overreach of what they had said they were going to do in the first place. Similarly to like what American police tend to do from time to time, they say they're there for one thing and then abuse their power and say, hey, well, we're here already. We're going to do this. We're doing this in the case of, don't you want us to find the bad guys? The bad guys have these really terrible things. We don't know what they're dealing with. They could be armed. Maybe they have these weapons. Maybe they could cause mass destruction. I don't know. Like these cops got to go in there. But now this is Team America World Police. This is the true parody where it comes from here.
Same function, essentially. You know, it's like, oh, do you need social services? Oh, you need schools built, right? Like these women need to go to school, right? We'll help you build that. And that just like serves as a tool to like kind of like justify, like all of a sudden, like at its core, it's about swagger. Like the US wants its swagger back, and like swagger and power and like influence, and like Iran is next door and like things like that. It's like comes like really close to like also China and Russia and says, hey, we're here and we have military bases and we can like strike you. So there's a lot of different factors, but like they kind of use this like feminist issue of women's rights as like a crutch, you know, as a weapon, and they weaponize women's rights. But what they end up doing, like the knock effect of the occupation is it's like, yeah, when you end up like bombing like little villages and you won't build goodwill. They build a lot of like dissatisfaction. That eventually turns into Taliban insurgency, and it just grows and it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows until we reach modern day.
And I do have to say, because a lot was talked also about the as we transition in America from the Bush administration to the Obama administration, a lot of rhetoric was meant, we don't like the continuing wars in Afghanistan. We want to pare back and scale back, although that rhetoric was met with, increases of troops, continuing like increase of presence there. A lot of like a stalling for like some justifiable reasons, but a lot just like Obama just didn't want to be the one to rock the boat. He's like, maybe for justifiable reasons, maybe for cowardice reasons, just didn't want to give his approval ratings another hit. And so in response, maybe like a compromise, you led to an expansion of a drone program that was already done under the George W. Bush administration, and just intensified under the Obama administration. And like a lot of these drone strikes were in Pakistan, a lot of them were in Iran and Yemen and other places, and a lot of them were in Afghanistan as well. So it's like it's double dipping there in that way.
And this is why this is why I say it's not Biden's fault. Like, Obama could have done this and he didn't do it. At least Biden's owning it. He says, listen, man, this is going to be painful to pull the plug. Obama didn't dare to do it. He actually doubled down. He's like, actually, I'm going to send more troops. Let's give it to the next president.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that Obama could have done it. Trump was the one who was like, hey, we bring the troops home. I got to go away from these liberals and Republicans. He called out Republicans even for being too war hawkish. And of course, like with many Trump things, we all know how that went. So thankfully, there were no smart people on the left, let's say, who felt that Donald Trump's anti-war message would possibly counteract any of the other terrible things he would end up doing. But just I think just coming out to Trump had the opportunity to even make a difference on this as well, and didn't, because he's got the same interests as most presidents, or all presidents who have Republican backing do, which are interests towards corporate power and American imperialism. These aren't just throwing around these things as buzzwords, but it's like the relationship between Dick Cheney and Halliburton and a number of other people in Bush's government and Trump's government and Obama's government, and now unfortunately Biden's government too, who have connections to these companies that have been doing literal war profiteering, where like they're able to turn around and make $6 off a can of Coke because they say, oh, well, it's difficult to distribute it in Afghanistan, when it's like, no, you're just making kickbacks off of the US taxpayers, right? Like, you get this entire mess. Part of that mess is now being reported as, oh, where are the Taliban getting these weapons? Well, the United States was allegedly training the Afghan military, and to the tune of somewhere near $80 billion over the course of 20 years. And once the Taliban gained more control, like you said, because people were dissuaded and discouraged and kind of angry and upset with the completed fuckery that was happening because the United States' continued involvement in the region, they were just able to go, hey, look, someone left all these really shiny guns, and the people who know how to work them are now on our side, because the enemy of our enemy is our friend. So like it just seems like a mess all around that leads to where we get to the present day, kind of where we started this conversation.
Yeah, and I think like this past week has been like it's a lot of things involved. Like like on the Afghan side, like you bring up this like Halliburton corporate, like the corporate power structure, like a lot of people got rich, right? Like on the Afghan side, like there was a vested interest in keeping the war going. Like these elites that were empowered and like basically just like spent the last 20 years or part of this past 20 years like enriching themselves because the US allowed them to. They just kept throwing money as if it was going to fix something, like as if like building an army based on like American ideals, right? And this is like one of the failings of this past week, specifically the past few weeks. Like the Afghan army fell apart because it was relying on like American style like supply routes. Like it just failed in so many instances. But everybody in many different ways had like an invested interest in also keeping the war going. And those are the people you empowered to like lead this country in a fight against the Taliban, which is this like deeply repressive and authoritarian movement. And so what happens now? Like the Taliban is like more media savvy, more strategic. It's smarter. It's more powerful. It just defeated a U.S. superpower. Like
now they've got the swagger.
Now they've got the swagger. You know, like they're just walking through Kabul, like, and also the most amazing, like the best analysis of how you should look why the Taliban was able to survive this like ferocious assault by the US for almost 20 years, or the US assisted for 20 years, was that they were like, the occupation was so powerfully, like, had such a negative force, right? That's what occupations do. And like progress cannot be made under occupation and during war, right? So all these these things that we cite as, you know, women's rights got better, and like there was a flourishing art scene, and like people could do things, which was true in a lot of metropolitan, cosmopolitan cities in Afghanistan. It's not true of the rural countryside, which bore the brunt of the past 20 years. That's where the war was fought. But the US bombed the shit out of the Taliban and continued to kill all Taliban members, right? Like not much of its leadership, but it killed all its foot soldiers essentially. But it didn't matter. The Taliban it was able to continue narco traffic and raise money. But they were able to motivate folks to join them for very little because the other side was so corrupt and weren't paying their soldiers. And so you're easily able to recruit folks to fight against the US. And now we're looking at them in this like almost like legitimate capacity. That's what the US gave them. They gave them all the weapons, all the legitimacy, and put them on the diplomatic stage in Doha. Like Clarissa Ward is in Kabul being like falling for their spin, being like, they're nice to me. I'm like, yeah, they're not going to kill you, dude. They're going to kill people that look like me. They're going to kill my friends and family. And so here we are in 2021, and the end result of like 20 years of so-called investments, you know, it's insulting.
So the Taliban is claiming that, like, okay, this time around we're going to be, you know, within the boundaries and parameters of Islam, you know, we're going to be a lot more, you know, respectful towards women's rights and a lot more like modern in those kinds of ways. People will have broader freedoms, and, you know, it won't be like the West, but it'll be, you know, it won't be like, you know, the Taliban of old, right? How come no one believes this?
Because they sound like that guy. Hey baby, I've changed. They sound like that person that's like, hey, like this time it's different, and it's not different, you know. Like they're just a little bit more strategic. Like the Taliban is that boyfriend who doesn't yell at his girlfriend in public, but he does it behind doors. You know, like they're being extremely strategic and trying to like influence also global media, and like the media is just like not equipped to do like. The media is obviously complicit in why we were there for a very long time. And so are like the American people, right? Like nobody gave a shit. Like, thank you for all the GoFundMe donations this week, but like you never gave a shit. Like people should have cared. Like people should have cared about Black folks, and people should have cared about Haiti, and people should have cared about Colombia. But like nobody cares until it's like too late, when it's a moment of crisis. And I appreciate like all of the outpouring of support and like folks like tuning in, but like this history started a long time ago. This occupation lasted 20 years ago. There's no viable anti-war movement in this country. Trust me, I tried to join it. You know, like I was on my own on these panels as the only Afghan American. Even with my own community, there weren't folks that were ready to oppose the war. Everybody kind of fell for it, and the Taliban has just only picked up like lessons on what it needs to do to stay legitimate on the international level. They want continued like money coming into the country. They don't want to live in the same rubble of Kabul of like the mid 90s. And so I think we're slowly going to see like what they really are about, and they're going to clamp down on things. And like this is a small window. And I'm worried about what the next stage looks like from this end of things, right? Like the US is going to be like, well, you're a bad actor in a dark region, and we couldn't impose our will on this country, but here are some sanctions. You know, like we're going to punish you for not protecting and promoting women's rights. And it's like, that is also not the solution.
Right. As we get kind of to wrap things up a little bit, I feel like there's a burning desire among Americans, especially, to be like, okay, what do we do? How do we fix this? And there has to be a real understanding that no, this is a case where America, at least is having to reconcile with imperial decisions that were made decades ago that were just constantly staved off for political reasons, to get from one president to the next, from one administration to the next, from one party swap over to the next. But now these chickens are coming home to roost, so to speak. And so we're in this time where we have to reconcile with the result of these years of poor decisions, these years of mistreatment and behavior. And so really what America needs to learn to do is to kind of take a step back and go, me being in the me being all up in the mix has kind of been left up to a problem. And my inclination as a country to get involved for whatever is moralistically good, putting my own decision on what moralistically good as a country is over there, has not been working. So maybe we don't do this anymore, right? What, from the American perspective, do you think is next? And then what do you think from the Afghan perspective is also next? Because similarly as America was trying to build soft power in the region with, building schools, trying to do other outreach things and social other ways, trying to promote that kind of culture, China is very interested in building soft power there as well, and including Afghanistan in infrastructure projects and other foreign direct investment projects and things like that. And so that's a two-pronged question there. What should the U.S. do / not do? And then for the Afghan people who have a choice to make between the Taliban and whatever resistance exists to that, but also the geopolitical desires of the next round of big figures. There's Russia, there's China, your India even, who are in the region. What do you think are the path next on those two kind of theaters of this? All good answers begin with a long sigh.
What the U.S. can do, the U.S. owes the Afghan people reparations. 45 years, but fine, 20 years. 20 years of pain and misery, man. 20 years of drone strikes, 20 years of CIA-run militia squads who were known to be abusive and to just to beat the shit out of people and insult people. And 20 years of backing a corrupt government, 20 years of mistakes, 20 years of not giving my people a chance. You owe us reparations. So at this moment today, in the next few days, the next few weeks, secure the airport. That's what the U.S. owes us, and get as many people out. Secondly, the U.S. owes not just the facilitation of these flights, but that needs to offer these folks a safe haven, refugee, resettlement money, and a place to live. That's what the U.S. owes all these folks. Anybody who's spent 20 years in some capacity, people are getting in trouble because they cooked for a NATO soldier. That's who's being targeted right now. Okay, then give them at least somewhere to live so they don't have to get shot and killed, and give them some place to live with dignity, man. Dude, every day I wake up, I'm damn, man, Los Angeles is cool. It's a great place to live, man, right? Beaches right there, there are mountains nearby. I would rather live in the place that I'm from, with my people, with the same cultures and the same outfits, with the best food, with where I can walk down the street and hear my native tongue be spoken. And I can't do that. Right? So at the very least, give people who were under threat of being fucking executed, imprisoned, lashed, being denied to go to their work because they're a woman, people being denied to live a dignified life. You owe them a safe haven. So open your doors to refugees. And then secondly, and thirdly, for actionable items, we have a move on petition that you can find at twitter.com/Afghans Tomorrow. We're on Instagram at Afghans for a Better Tomorrow. We have a move on petition that we're driving right now that is surely to hit 100K with folks who are tuning into your show. So those are the like kind of 4 things that I have for people who are tuning in. And I mean, just lastly, this is ideological, but like, let's get out of the mindset of like not giving a shit about brown and black people at home, but also abroad until it's too late. You know, like let Afghan people be the last people where you're like, damn, I have to send a GoFundMe so like a queer Afghan can like escape and probably like live because this is the reality, live an undignified life somewhere because they had to flee their home or live under repressive rules. Those are the 2 options due to the U.S. actions. So let's try to. It all starts with folks at home, man. Like, I hate to say it.
Yeah. There's an old played out slogan that says like victory begins at home when it becomes to war. But like, I think America could do a lot of like inward thinking, just focus more on the inside itself. Be a little more introspective, kind of like we were in the beginning of this episode. But
yeah.
No. I want to thank you very much, Arash, for like just taking the time out for speaking on all of these different things. You let people know like where to find you and like other different things and ways to help. And I'll leave the links for that in the podcast description and the YouTube video description so people can easily find that as well. But yeah, this has been phenomenal. Thank you very much for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope people got like a quick 101 on what happened in Afghanistan. And I hope I left people feeling with at least a little bit of empowerment towards the end.
That's the hope.
That's the hope.
We're back from that interview now, and I'm joined with Bam. Bam, how you doing? What's good?
Pretty good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy you're here. Sad to be talking about this kind of topic naturally. But I mean, I'd love your breadth of knowledge of this like world and area of the region, just because like folks there, you've heard their experiences like on the ground in that kind of way. So I'm glad to have this kind of conversation. But after kind of getting that kind of conversation that we just had, now like I want to get more into the American media reaction, because Arash was kind of able to kind of talk about the stuff that's on the ground kind of happening there and kind of some of those feelings, and we went into a lot of historical context there, and we will continue that here. But the media reaction all the time, especially in regular discourse with things on a day-to-day level, you get this kind of, I guess this sort of, you fall into a malaise where the right-wing media ecosystem is always on some wild nonsense, especially this year with Biden. They're really not talking about anything. It's just nonsense about cancel culture, nothing about substantive about Biden's policy whatsoever. And then on the CNN, MSNBC side, because they've essentially morphed into one and the same thing now, there's barely any liberal analysis or critique on MSNBC, save for maybe Chuck Todd and some weekend hosts maybe, right? But sorry, not Chuck Todd, Chris Hayes. They all have a very homogenous sounding names, but you get a very like sort of milquetoast analysis from there as well. And so I wanted to start like, it was really disappointing. You expected like even from, this was a really great opportunity for, even liberal media to sort of, do the thing we expected they were going to do by following the Biden narrative, right? And following the party line. But they could have used this to recontextualize the whole Afghanistan project within party lines and say it was a Bush started thing and was a boondoggle. It obviously the Democrats could do a party line trick and paper over the fact that Obama made things noticeably worse and expanded the program many times with the Afghanistan surge and other things like that, even though he promised to bring troops back. You could do some petty hit shots on Trump saying that he promised to end Afghanistan. He was on the record talking about bringing the troops home from Afghanistan, and now he's scrubbing his website because he needs to act in opposition to Trump, right? So there's a whole lot of angles that Chuck Todd, as a political operative for the Democratic Party, which he essentially is, as a the journalist he pretends to be. There are a number of different angles he can go here, but he chose to go with a "this is bad for Biden" angle, which we're not, Biden lovers here. I'm certainly not, but it's definitely not the right angle to go here. So let's go with this clip of Chuck Todd speaking for Meet the Press in the Today Show. So it has probably even more of a reach than the regular Meet the Press show, kind of talking and recapping over the past week as things were happening, what was going on in Afghanistan.
Chuck, good morning. A lot of people said this was going to happen. I don't think they thought it would happen this quickly. People like General David Petraeus, who said you have to keep a small force in the country to keep the Taliban at bay. But as Monica just reported, President Biden is standing by his position, saying, I'm not going to pass this war on to a fifth president after me. How does that decision look this morning?
Look, it's Vice President Biden was an advocate of getting out 10 years ago. So, look, his mind was pretty made up when he took the oath of office on this. And obviously the Pentagon and intelligence folks don't necessarily love this decision, but they all acknowledge he had a bunch of bad choices sitting in front of him. But at the end of the day, Willie, this is a decision that's going to haunt him. Right. And it may be he was not so subtle in that statement yesterday. He put this blame right on President Trump, saying that he negotiated this deal. He's the one that wanted to bring the Taliban to Camp David. Speaking of Camp David, something that he ended up deciding not to do. He created the situation and essentially tied his hands. All of that is there's a lot of truth in there. But at the end of the day, Biden's the one at the wheel right now. It's a look. Anything that happens, a reconstituted al-Qaeda, an ISIS-like result like we saw after withdrawal in Iraq, anything like that, this decision's going to get relitigated over and over again. Look, I happen to think that Biden can serve 8 years, and in year 9, something happens, and we're going to be relitigating this decision 9 years later. It's something that's just going to haunt his legacy.
No question about it. And as Richard Engel put it, the Afghan military trained by the United States for 20 years is melting away before our eyes. Chuck, thanks so much.
So yeah, just coming out of that, before you jump in, Bam, I'll just say that Chuck Todd is the very person who creates the narrative on whether or not this haunts Biden. And so it's interesting that he's kind of coming out from the jump saying that if Biden were in this non-existent 9th year of his administration, it would haunt him that much. Like, it's that much of a stench. The war in Iraq and Afghanistan, which just as much as any other, senator or major political figure at the time during the lead up to the war in Iraq and Afghanistan is responsible, except for maybe Barbara Lee, in the run up to the whole thing. He's only been president for a year, not even a full year. And he's winding things down. I think that's a good thing that, he's willing to take some temporary blowback right now for ultimately winding down this failed project that presidents for the past decade have acknowledged on both sides as a failed project and haven't done anything about. So that's what I have to say there. Is Chuck Todd has the ability to set the narrative on that, very much so from his position. And he's choosing to go with, oh, this fails for Biden. This is terrible for Biden. So it's interesting what's happening right there. Which side is really showing the power there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I don't listen to Chuck Todd, but he sounds like a classic neocon right there. I could hear Dick Cheney saying that. One of these people that just wants to stay in these situations for whatever reason, but it's just we have to keep our imperial stamp wherever. A couple of things about what he said. Was Biden really saying that we got to leave Afghanistan before? I mean, I can't even imagine Biden having a stance on something when he was vice president, but whatever. But yeah, him saying that this decision is gonna haunt him, and it just, why? On some level, you have to be honest. Do people really do they see these images in Afghanistan and they're going to have some lasting effect on people? Oh my God, you remember when Biden said, let's leave Afghanistan, and then there were the people on that plane? It's going to be out of people's minds very fast, those images. And as the Taliban takes over the country more and more, whatever atrocities end up happening in Afghanistan, there's going to be less images of them. They may happen, but there's going to be less images. Then Chuck Todd goes on to say some more classic neocon type of rhetoric, saying, what if, paraphrasing, what if we see a reconstituted al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and he brings up ISIS. It's very obvious that he doesn't have much knowledge of that region, because if you really know what's going on, the Taliban was ISIS before ISIS. The only thing that made ISIS, the Islamic State or whatever you want to call it, different than al-Qaeda is that they claimed to have a state. They took territory and ran it as a nation. The Taliban did that 20 years ago. They had an Islamic state that they took over from a presiding government. Now, obviously, there's a lot of details in that, and I'm sure your former guest got into a lot of that stuff, but Chuck Todd doesn't really know what he's talking about. Al-Qaeda, there was probably like 40 dudes that were like claiming to be Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan at one point, like maybe. It was just a bunch of guys going there to Afghanistan to train, learn how to use guns and stuff. That's not really a threat, obviously. But him saying, ISIS, like I feel like that's the thing to get people like, oh my God. And the Taliban is ISIS. Like it's not, maybe the difference is like there's nobody going out committing terrorist attacks in like France claiming to do it for the Taliban. But those people weren't really doing it for ISIS either. So it's, it gets a little convoluted, but Chuck,
because ultimately, like what you're getting at here is like ultimately there's similar goals they're getting at. It's like, right?
Chuck Todd is showing his neocon colors. He's using these buzzwords, Al Qaeda, ISIS, to try to like scare people. I don't know how much the people care, but he's putting this like it's going to haunt Biden because these things could happen, and maybe those buzzwords would get somebody to listen. But he's totally wrong. He's totally wrong. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, but these things that he's trying to fearmonger, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it either. I think top level of all of this is that we've shown the American political attention span and imagination is like, unfortunately, very, very like minimal. And yeah, I don't want to say like American people politically are like stupid or anything like that. But the truth is like there's a short attention span. The news cycle moves very quickly. And a lot of times you aren't getting people actually holding back and going, wait a minute, 2 weeks ago we were just talking about this thing. Sounds a little bit hypocritical to other stuff we were talking about. Hypocrisy, like we're way in the post-hypocrisy era at this point. So it doesn't even matter. But yeah, I'm kind of over with Chuck Todd. I again think he is the kind of person who can set the tone, and I would expect him to kind of fall into the more of the fall in line with Biden thing, but no, he's kind of falling in line with the rhetoric of the military state that we should just be perpetually in Afghanistan forever. That, what about the women and girls and children that the Taliban are going to oppress? And like, well, what about the women and girls and children that America is, or a lot of American conservatives are talking about oppressing, like over here at home? There's a lot of issues in our own country that we're not handling super well, and we shouldn't be talking about cleaning up messes that we've already made in other countries when we talk about, no, it's okay. We'll clean it. And the mess is still there for like 20, 30, 40 years. So it's about time we get out just in that sense of we've proven that we're not capable of cleaning up that situation. And it's like, that's not to say like, oh, hands off the situation. America or Americans shouldn't care about it, but we shouldn't have this expectation of our military to just, go out and solve the problem. Like, you just call the police and they'll just solve the problem. It's a lot deeper than that. It's a lot more complicated than that.
The American military could never, after they started bombing in October 2001, when I was seeing what was happening after, when the Taliban started to take over, I was like, this would have happened in like, April 2002. Like it would have been that bad. Like this
would have happened regardless, whether it was 10 years ago or today or yesterday or 5 years in the future. Like this is just, they're waiting for this moment.
Or 15 years ago. Once Bush made the decision to like put troops on the ground and occupy Afghanistan in that way, and to like quote unquote defeat the Taliban.
Yeah, and not accept their surrender.
Yeah, exactly. Or accept them giving up Osama bin Laden. It was gonna be terrible, no matter what. 15 years ago, it would have been just like this. So I mean, and I was waiting for it. Whenever the American troops are going to leave, I'm like, it's going to explode in Afghanistan. It's already been messed up since the 90s. Really the most, I hate to say it like this, but probably the most peaceful time in the past 40 years was between, whenever the Taliban kind of took over until 2001. 92 or 96, I can't remember. That was probably the time when you had people from the Afghani government coming to America. Hey, what's up with this pipeline? They were actually coming here in delegations and stuff. So I don't know, going back to Chuck Todd, like, it's unfortunate that his idea is that this is bad for Biden. It's not bad for Biden. It's bad for the military industrial complex. It's bad for like U.S. imperialism. It just shows that, I mean, if anybody had an idea that there was something good going on in Afghanistan, this is obvious that there wasn't anything good going on in Afghanistan with American troops being there or NATO troops being there. It was never a good thing. It was always a bad idea. We were lied into that war, and this is the result. Now we're relying on the graces of mercenary extremists, the Taliban. We're relying on them for the situation there to be decent, and that's a damn shame.
Very damn shame. And so as we move on to the continued failures of American media to properly dissect the situation and contextualize it for the viewers who, and again, in the viewers' defense here, I'm not trying to say Americans are ill-informed. I'd say the media does a poor job of informing them because everyone else is busy doing their regular jobs. I am not a very educated plumber, right? Because plumbing is not my job. And so I respect plumbers who are able to come and do that kind of work for me, right? So when it comes to news and breaking down that kind of analysis, there's an expectation we're supposed to have on the media to do this right. Nevertheless, as we move on more towards the center right, I guess, the spectrum, to the cable news network, if you will, we have Jake Tapper on State of the Union speaking with the current Secretary of State Blinken, and this is what he's making a comparison to historically here, just completely showing his ass of what he doesn't understand historically.
I really wish they put the Blinken's name down there on the Chiron, because nobody knows who that is, dude. Come on, put his name so we can know who he is.
President Biden is intent on avoiding a Saigon moment. That's a reference, of course, to the hasty and humiliating U.S. evacuation from Vietnam. But with this troop surge to airlift Americans out of Afghanistan, aren't we already in the midst of a Saigon moment?
No, we're not.
Yeah, so never mind that. Keep in mind that Blinken's job is to defend the Biden administration because he's the Secretary of State. So a lot of this is his call here. This is his turf, as we're kind of getting used to semi-normal administrations again, or at least the acceptable normal under this neoliberal hellscape. The comparison that Jake Tapper is making, I don't know, hopefully a new producer wrote that question for him, but making the comparison of Afghanistan to Vietnam and kind of saying that this is Biden's embarrassing moment, it removes, not only is it kind of an ahistorical comparison to Vietnam, and of course none of these comparisons are going to be perfect because not all these situations are A to A, right? But it doesn't take a huge understanding of history. You don't have to have taken Cold War politics or history at all or have lived through it, as Jake Tapper probably has to some extent, to understand that Biden has been president for 1 year. And so there's something a little bit more to this Afghanistan thing than 1 year, because we didn't just move into there January 20th. We didn't just get involved in there after 9/11. There's a lot more context here that Jake Tapper is doing a terrible job of explaining. Go in, Bam.
Well, or it could kind of speak to Jake Tapper's knowledge of foreign policy in America never changes. These things happen across party lines, that imperialist quality in American foreign policy does not change. Jake Tapper is aware of that. So maybe he kind of he let it slip a little bit, saying it looks bad for everybody, and it's happening on Biden's watch. So it's yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think how I'm trying to explain it. I think Jake Tapper knows that this Afghanistan war all these presidents, all the generals, all their hands are dirty. And it just happens to be falling on Biden, the Saigon moment. So it makes him look bad, even though he wasn't there. I mean, he was vice president for a long time, but like, even though he didn't have anything to do with the past 20 years, like, well, you should just keep the ball rolling with the imperial America.
Yeah, that's the implicit alternative Jake Tapper is talking about.
Yeah. It's interesting though. Like, it's interesting how, because when you're saying that, Biden hasn't even been president for a year. How could you make that his Saigon moment? It should still be Bush's Saigon moment, I guess. But maybe Jake Tapper's like, you guys are all part of the same machine. So if it happens under your watch, it's your fault. I don't know.
I think there's actually something I think to be said there, Bam, because we always have these kind of like conversations about, well, why do these people have such different worldviews than us? And like my response is because I don't want to say I've like swam in these circles as like, oh, I'm hobnobbing with like CNN people, but like I understand kind of the way they think because it's like a class thing. It's like they come from a certain structure thing. And that's really the belief that, hey, when you're president, regardless of what happens regardless of what happened before, it's on your watch. The buck stops with you. So you have to take responsibility or the heat for it. Now you have to, at least I was taught, you're supposed to like back up your hypotheses with data or like analysis. And like, I would think someone at the stature of Jake Tapper would realize that, again, not for the fault of America or Americans, more just the structure of what cable news has become on the cable news network, the 24-hour cable news cycle, is that y'all going to be talking about something else very soon. Because like Bam said, as soon as there are no more cameras there, as soon as this becomes a topic that, we talked about Afghanistan a lot, people's propensity towards learning about world news, especially in America, is kind of low anyways. Let's talk about the next thing that's going on. A next thing will happen. The news will continue. And yeah, Biden's approval ratings taking a dip. It's all you can focus on right now, because before this, again, all we were talking about was cancel culture and who could and couldn't say what at whatever time, according to some deranged conservatives. We're only now getting into this point, and I'm glad we're starting a PowerPoint again now because it actually has a damn meaning. But we're getting to this point legislatively in the Biden administration where we might see some things around infrastructure, budget, maybe voting rights, but there is nothing else to talk about. And so Afghanistan's taking up a lot of energy, and so you have to have a lot of these half-baked takes right now. But once it isn't happening and there's other things to get mad at Biden for or be happy about Biden for, probably the flip side is going to happen. I've been doing this long enough to know that like it's going to get to the point where I'm going to be complaining about things Biden is doing, but they're going to have some other optics because people have another frame of thinking, like I was kind of describing earlier. And so this frame of thinking says that, oh, well, the gatekeepers in the media, they're saying that this thing, even though they're not reading into the details at all, is net good for people and we should just support this, or it's net bad for people and we should oppose this. And like everyone sort of leads their opinion. There's a disconnect. Maybe it's purposeful, maybe it's not, Bam. I think sometimes you assume a little bit better intentions than I do of these people, for better or for worse. But like, they have a platform. What they say is what people end up believing. So if they do a little bit better of a job with that, then they can maybe give people some history, give people some context to these things. But no, they're just kind of doing a self-fulfilling prophecy here. And it's not, not helpful to Biden, but I also don't care about what's helpful to Biden or not. It's just not proper reporting, not proper like factual journalism. That's the kind of thing I'm much more upset about.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned how like, these things don't last very long. I remember when we started Power Report, there were a lot of people thinking it was about to be World War III. When General Soleimani was assassinated in that airport in Iraq, people were like, oh my God, like this is it. And that was over in a week or so.
That's why that's the whole reason I like the structure of Power Report, is because we can have those moments and then look back and go, well, what significance did it have at the end of the day?
And also, I think with us, like we know that, so we're able to take the time to speak about the historical context, to talk about things in a little bit more detail and not just be frantic, like, oh my God, this is the craziest thing. No, like Afghanistan, like I was saying, Afghanistan, this was going to happen 15 years ago, no matter what. The Taliban's been there waiting. They've been armed. They've been taking territory, back since they lost it. They've been, maybe we'll probably get into some stuff later that I want to speak about, some stuff that hasn't gotten that much press over the years. But yeah, this was going to happen no matter what. And it sucks. It's unfortunate, but this is this is what Bush did when they invaded. They made it so this result was going to happen.
Yeah, this is unfortunately just like the bed that they had made, essentially. This was bound to happen. And
were you going to play more of the Jake Tapper one or no?
No, the Jake Tapper clip, that was essentially all I had. Because I think just the comparison, overall the comparison to Saigon is just like the most ridiculous aspect of it. But now let's move on to the dominant media, the most censored, the most canceled, the most viewed media is, of course, Fox News Channel and their flagship dumbass, Tucker Carlson.
Socialist.
Noted socialist and bringer of truth tellers, platformer of truth tellers, onto but Tucker Carlson had some wild takes about the whole Afghanistan situation that we're going to break down here, especially in compared to some historical things he said. So let's jump into that. I know Bam's just absolutely eager to do so.
But first, since Kabul has just fallen, it might be worth asking the most obvious question of all. Why did the Taliban win? How did the 6th century triumph over the 21st century? There are indications that the single most notorious and reviled government in the world, primitive people famous for their brutality, rigidity, and humorlessness, are more popular in parts of Afghanistan than they were when we expelled the mullahs from Kandahar 20 years ago. They don't seem to be less popular. So how did that happen? What's the answer? We ought to pause to think about that. Let's not just blow past it like it was an act of God. It's not. What is the answer? Well, countries are very complicated, all of them, so there are likely many answers. But one of those answers may be that the population of Afghanistan has firmly rejected what our leaders were selling it over 20 years. It turns out that the people of Afghanistan don't actually want gender studies symposia. They didn't actually buy the idea that men can become pregnant. They thought that was ridiculous. They don't hate their own masculinity. They don't think it's toxic. They like the patriarchy. Some of their women like it too. So now they're getting it all back.
I want to stop there because it's a two-parter. That was a banger that Tucker Carlson had there, but he makes a broad generalization that we used to call racism. Now we just call it like selling ads for Procter and Gamble late at night. But like this, it broadly says they're humorless, they're primitive. Talking about again, he's going to go into this blaming Biden thing here because Tucker Carlson is a political operative. He knows where the bread's buttered, and he knows that this is a really easy way to just say, oh yeah, even though Biden's been president for a year, none of my hog audience really cares or understands about that. And so they're going to just say, oh yeah, it's Biden's fault because he's doing this. He's making America look weak. Trump made America look strong and tough when he was going over with like a lot of leaders touching globes and shit. Like that was real tough and gangster over there. Not gonna lie, the picture was kind of hot, but like this issue we're mainly getting at here is, yes, there's a main layer of, I think is very obvious to us, like racism and like broad xenophobia, but there's also this sort of random shoehorning in of American politics when we're talking about these, again, the same nonsense controversies of the conservative era in 2021. Cancel culture, gender studies, colleges, women's rights, the masculinity, all things that, again, most people in America, maybe kind of think about here or there on a day-to-day basis, or maybe they're told that, oh, we have to think about this more because of the goddamn liberals. But how, in reality, you can just, learn about these things, get an idea about these things, but it's not something that you spend night and day thinking about all the time. But Bam, what were some of your thoughts here on Tucker's shit.
Oh my God, man. I mean, you know what? Okay, like like what he's saying is upsetting, but I don't want to react to it that way because sadly there's a lot of people that consider themselves on the left or something that think Tucker Carlson is a credible voice in, political media. And I blame Glenn Greenwald for that. I'm just joking.
And Jimmy Dore, just joking.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that loser. But I want to answer his questions and talk about what he said. He said, why did the Taliban win? The Taliban really never lost because they were always there. And it's not easy to take, like when America invaded, they said that the Taliban was like out of power and it was like 6 months or something like that. But they didn't go anywhere. It's not like they killed every single Taliban government person or anything like that. They were still there. And I know Tucker Carlson is not really like into all this stuff, but the Taliban is a creation of the intelligence services of Pakistan. Pakistan's right there. So they always had protection, these people. They always had a means of being armed. They were always there. So to say like, why did they win? I don't know. And we still don't know if the Taliban actually won. They could change, we don't know. It could end up being different, but more on that when we talk about China. He said the 6th century triumphed over the 21st century and they're primitive people. That's absolutely ridiculous. Anybody that knows anything about the war in Afghanistan in these past 20 years knows that those Taliban fighters were very sophisticated. They had great training. Once the Pakistani intelligence, the Pakistan military has access to all the training that American military has. So no, he's basically referring to their clothes and their hats and them dances they were doing, listening to Drake. So no, I'm joking, but he's being racist saying that. I know that, but for somebody who thinks he's credible, there's nothing 6th century about the Taliban necessarily when it comes to fighting as a fighting force. They're very sophisticated. I heard stories from guys that were in the American military that fought in Afghanistan who told me some crazy stuff that Taliban were able to do to target caravans and target soldiers. And I would also, I'm sorry if I'm being long-winded, I apologize. There's a documentary from about 2010 called Restrepo, and it takes place in May 2007. In 2007, I remember watching that documentary. I saw American soldiers getting fired on by by Taliban, and they're sitting there crying behind trees. It's not like the American military is like, oh my! It's not like a bunch of RoboCops going over there. They're human beings, and the Taliban are human beings. Sometimes those Taliban fighters were more about it than the American soldiers. I remember these American soldiers taking cover behind trees and rocks, getting shot at by like AKs that they clean with shoestrings, crying, bawling. Like they put the camera on the guy. It's devastating. So Tucker's giving the American military a little bit more credit than they deserve. Also, when he says primitive people, these people are this primitive thing that he's saying, like this 6th century, like this ideology that he's talking about is the same ideology, it's the same people more or less that Ronald Reagan referred to as freedom fighters. Ronald Reagan used to be on TV saying the word mujahideen and calling them freedom fighters when they were fighting against the Soviets. It's the same thing, dude. You wouldn't be saying that in 1988. You would be saying, oh yeah, they're fighting against the godless Soviets. And they were. And America was helping them. And Ronald Reagan used to call them freedom fighters. And they made a Rambo movie. Pretty sure it was Rambo 3, where Rambo is out there wearing Pashtun clothes, fighting with the Mujahideen, calling them Mujahideen, fighting jihad with them. And then that became a bad word.
Rocky 3.
Right, Rambo 3.
Right, Rambo 3, yeah, sorry. But But like, yeah, it's absolutely insane. Like how, I mean, it's not insane. We're so used to this hypocrisy difference, like Tucker Carlson. Of course, Tucker Carlson would not have been around as a pundit way back then, but he definitely would have been a pundit, last year, speaking about, things relating to the Middle East and Donald Trump. When you have a daily show, you have to do these things. Bam, what are your thoughts?
And also, okay, because I know you're going to get into another part of him, so I want to mention everything that he was saying.
Yes.
He said, he's saying, they don't seem to be less popular. He doesn't know that. He doesn't know what Afghan people actually feel, like non-Taliban affiliated Afghan people feel about these people. He has no idea. I don't think like when Trump went and got, I'm pretty sure, what's his name? Abdul Ghani, I forgot his last name. The guy who's like the leader of the Taliban. When Trump negotiated to get him released from prison, I don't think that there were protests in Afghanistan, in Kabul or Kandahar or anywhere, Mazar-e Sharif, saying, hey, free this guy from prison. I don't think the Afghan people really cared too much that guy was in jail. Trump negotiated to get him released from jail, and then he was living the good life in Qatar for a while. So Tucker knows how popular the Taliban is. And then when he's talking about gender studies and stuff like that, hopefully anybody who thinks that this man is a credible voice when it comes to like any politics having to do with anti-imperialism or the left or anything, hopefully you hear that and know that this man's a piece of shit. Like, hopefully you can hear him saying that, talking about men getting pregnant and gender studies and stuff. Hopefully you hear that and realize how racist he is, because he's saying that he's speaking about Afghan people as a monolith. And that's just the easy level racism to detect if you're intelligent. So please get this man, please, like, stop with this Tucker Carlson shit.
And I think, like, to your point on this, with people should like know better about this at this point, where Tucker Carlson is just, he's doing race baiting. He's making generalizations about an entire group of people and like what they believe and how they're thinking and everything like that. But he's also for an American audience specifically who is admittedly very ignorant about a lot of these things in the world policy level. He is taking it to this place where he can then say, oh, it's now there's a thing about something that we are talking about every single night. It's gender and women's studies. It goes beyond racism. It goes to sexism. It goes towards like just absolute bigotry in a number of different levels. And like on a true like coalitional, united, radical, intersectional left, right? Something that we're trying to strive for here on this show and like on other shows that are doing the right thing, right? You can be anti-war and you can be anti-imperial, and you can also be anti-racist. You can also be anti-transphobia and anti-homophobia and like anti-sexism and all these other different things, right? Like you can have this analysis all the time and not go like, no, we have to let a little bit of Tucker Carlson in because what he's saying is half right. And then he lets some lefties on from time to time and they know what they're talking about too. Like that makes it like, yeah, quote unquote lefties, right? Like it's absolute bullcrap. But do you have any other thoughts on that before we go towards a quick flip of Tucker Carlson last year talking about these things? Because as usual, I mean, it's very predictable at this point, but there's a very different script when there's a very different administration going on. So let's check that out.
Let's go for it.
We send overseas the better. That is one thing virtually everyone in Washington agrees on, except Donald Trump. Trump, whatever you think of him, does not agree. He does not believe that. And he said so for the last 5 years. Trump has been talking relentlessly about bringing the troops home from countries around the world. And maybe more than any other single reason, talk like that makes official Washington hate Donald Trump. Last night, the White House announced that we're finally bringing home many American soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan. And you would think there would be widespread celebration. That means families united, Americans out of harm's way. But very few in Washington are celebrating. The press corps, including some people who should know better, are still busy telling you how much Donald Trump hates the troops and wants them to die, the guy who's bringing them home. Add that to the irony file, which is bulging.
So there is Tucker Carlson supporting the idea of bringing troops home, which is a good idea when it's Trump doing it. And then when Biden's doing it, here's another chance to attack a Democrat. So it's very, these are the games that Republicans say, oh, well, they spent the past 4 years going, oh, well, what about with Obama? What about with like those were bad faith bullshit games from the get-go then, and they are now, because Republicans are the king of hypocrisy, and they've also invented curving hypocrisy, just like straight not caring about it for the longest as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I remember when Trump announced that he's bringing the troops home from Syria. And I remember this was probably the beginning of the end of a lot of, like, I getting super frustrated with left media at that time, because I remember watching some Gray Zone live stream, and these guys were going crazy. They're so excited. Yeah, Trump's going to bring the troops home from Syria. Obama didn't do that. And I'm like, since when did we start just believing what politicians say? And then at some point, Trump got on TV and said, yeah, we're bringing the troop. We're taking the troops out of Syria and we're moving them to Iraq so they can watch Iran. That's not troops coming home, folks. That's not troops coming home. And then when they got targeted, and then they would get targeted in Iraq, and then Trump assassinates Soleimani. It's really ironic. Who knows? Maybe Trump was playing it kind of like, you know what? I could do the in Afghanistan. And his generals were like, look, if you do that, it's going to look crazy. So you already kind of got a pretty messed up presidency here. Like, you don't want to have these images. Like, it's hard. Like, it's going to be wild if you, start saying we're going to send the troops out of Afghanistan. So he might have just passed the buck. Well, actually, no, I take that back. For sure he passed the buck, because he said that the troops were going to come home May 1st. That's what Trump said. I don't know if he was assuming he would get reelected or what, but you have to know there's a chance you're not going to get reelected. So he was at least potentially passing the buck. And anybody that knows anything in the Pentagon or whatever knows that if those troops are leaving, it's going to be bad. So it's funny that Tucker's saying they won, the Taliban won when it's under Biden. I wonder what his rhetoric would have been if it actually happened under Trump.
I mean, it is happening under Trump. Trump became president again after Mike Lindell stated that in August he just became president again. So, it's the My Pillow screed. Now, there's been enough My Pillow discourse, honestly. I want to kind of move on into more of a spotlight away from American media, because we now spent like damn near an hour on that. Now I'm more going towards like the overarching global, geopolitics that's going to happen here. One thing that I've definitely noticed is that, okay, with America coming out there, obviously there's a power vacuum within Afghanistan that the Taliban is trying to reach, but the Taliban doesn't have a lot of resources, and neither do Afghan people in the region right now. And so what you're going to see definitely are the powers surrounding the region. You have Pakistan, you have India, you have namely China, who are going to use the same sort of soft power that America was using in addition to their military power to try to win cultural support among the Afghan people, which they'll then turn into, political support with broadening geopolitical measures that China is definitely going to want to do in the region. China, there's a lot to be said about the way the United States, under both administrations, both parties, overhypes anti-China rhetoric, and for the purposes of racism and to keep the imperial power going. But at the same time, you also have to acknowledge that China is interested in imperial power, and they're interested in flexing that and learning from many of the mistakes of America, actually. So there's important to note that there shouldn't be underestimated by any means. But they are looking to see okay, what sort of infrastructure projects, what sort of, soft investment can we do in the region? And so, Bam, I know you had a lot of thoughts about that. I want you to jump in, because this is something that I'm very much watchful on as well.
Well, it's interesting because when I started seeing China mentioned in regards to Afghanistan, it's not new, because there's always been this kind of underlying idea that maybe part of the reason why Bush and them invaded Afghanistan was to counter China's power in the region. And if you go back to the Project for a New American Century that neocon screed, they talked a lot about China's power in there. I think China was mentioned most in that. But fast forward to now, it'll be interesting because there has been a lot about the Uyghurs in China. They're saying that there's, 1 million Uyghur Muslims that are in Chinese internment camps and their re-education camps and their slave labor camps, and China is like viewed by a lot of people and a lot of people in the Muslim world as one of the more like anti-Islam nations. And I've seen, various Muslim figures and, different people with a lot of influence speak about what China's doing to Uyghur Muslims in China. It'll be interesting, though, to see if the Taliban does start doing business with China with that going on in China. Because obviously the Taliban is viewed as an extremist Islamic group. Like they all they care about is Sharia law and all these different things. But it will be interesting if this group of if they form a government and they're willing to work with China, it may benefit them because one of the things that's been lacking in Afghanistan over all these years is infrastructure. And I think a lot of people do know that Afghanistan is sitting on, most estimates say at least $1 trillion worth of minerals. I always thought that when Trump dropped that mother of all bombs out there, I always felt like he was they were trying to make a mine or something like that. I don't know, but they said that they were targeting ISIS, but I'm like, that's kind of ridiculous. But anyway, it will be interesting to see if the Taliban does work with China, with the Chinese government, given that there's so much rhetoric about what China is doing to the Uyghur Muslims in China.
That's definitely a really good point I hadn't thought of, because I was thinking purely of like the economic impacts, that's soft power. But there's also their, again, not to be outdone by the United States, their definitely spotty record with the treatment of Muslim populations. And so that'll definitely be something to watch and definitely something to be concerned about. And before we end this thing, I think we did a really comprehensive analysis of the whole matter from a lot of different angles here. Love the show and I love that we're doing this. But the one other part of the discourse here that I'll take a maybe uncharacteristic step in and address about, also similarly to me defending Biden's a little strange, but there's a discourse around, the troops and how they feel. Immediately afterwards, there was messaging from the U.S. government, like, hey, a lot of people who participated in the 20-year excursions done on behalf of the Bush family were that folks who were part of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq might have like a lot of conflicting feelings, encouraging people to, talk to war buddies and friends and, keep a, connection with people and to call these numbers for help. Basically, like, don't kill yourselves is essentially what their response was, like, sadly, to this like kind of thing. And like, this is unfortunately another repetitive cycle where America as an institution, as a government, it's very gung-ho about its need and its desire to, treat troops with the utmost of respect. They'll go after Colin Kaepernick for kneeling to protest police violence, saying it's attacking the troops for some like unrelated reason. And yet there's this one instance where it's totally fine for the US government to say, fuck the troops. And that's when they are ending a war that they themselves got the troops into without any disregard, while saying like, you're doing this for your country, building up on all this like pride, all the support and all those other different things. And then you're saying, okay, we're ending the war now. You got the VA and we all know how that is for you. Don't hop off a bridge. And like, I say this as a survivor of like a lot of self-harm and all these other different things. It's a no military experience whatsoever, but like, that's my intersection they're bringing to the table. Like, gross to see the American government do this kind of thing. That being said, it's something that's been done throughout history. And so, like, to come at it from a perspective of the left, now is not the time to look at servicemen and women and people who have been in there and like laugh at them or say like, oh, told you so, or whoever. Because like, think about like when they're working on behalf of the American war project overseas, they have a responsibility of, you know, kindness and humanity that unfortunately too many of these soldiers don't hold up to. They feel like they're overseas in a foreign country. They're kings and whatever they do is whatever they do, right? You saw that with like Abu Ghraib, a whole number of different like war crimes that happened during our time there. To say nothing about America's war crimes more broadly. But now's a good time for the left, I think, to approach folks who are from experiencing the war in Afghanistan and go like, this is a time to rethink and re-strategize our approach to war, right? Like, why are we indoctrinating people from a young age to have pride and have support? Not in the end of like having pride and support in your family and armed service members. That's totally fine. But when are we going to break this cycle of not questioning the decisions of our political leaders when it's literally they're not sending their kids to die? It's the working class, it's the middle class, it's their kids who are being sent to die or get like permanently dismembered in these rich people's wars. And so there's a class analysis that I think we can have, and it's smart to have with the troops coming back, that doesn't involve going, oh, screw all of you, like you're all bad, you're all terrible for what you did. Like there needs to be nuance had there on the left, because that's how coalition building works. If you just become these like, oh, know it all, told you so, XYZ, you're not actually trying to bring people in, then these people are going to go down rabbit holes of radicalization, which are quite frankly far easier for people to get access to for a whole plethora of reasons than it is for people to get like good information on the left. And we're trying our best here on Power Report. We're trying our best to do those things. But I think as people who are on the left, we need to take this approach with service members and think of them as humans and as people, and use this as an opportunity to break some of these cycles that allow the U.S. war machine to be fed by, you know, like folks that we know that are good people that think they're doing something good for their country and protecting the things that they care about, but in reality are unfortunately pawns. And I think they know this and they learn this on the way coming out, because you hear these stories from veterans who are like, you know, dealing with the trauma that they're dealing with, etc. But not enough needs to be talked about. Okay, what can people as service members do, and what can we as the left do to kind of push the tides? Because I will say on my last point on this, Bam, sorry, we can do diatribes back and forth. That's totally fine. That's this podcast. But Bernie Sanders was pretty much the only Democrat who had more, I think, financial support, like small dollar donations from service members and people in the military than any other Democrat, and more than Donald Trump. All right, there's a bridge there that can be met. There's this idea that military service people, it's all rah, rah, red, white, and blue patriotism. There's a different kind of patriotism that can be defined that can be useful and non-xenophobic on the left, even though I'm not a big fan of patriotism. But if patriotism is defined by folks like Bernie Sanders, that's better than it being defined by neoliberals like Joe Biden and fascists like Donald Trump. Bam, I know maybe you have some thoughts on this, so go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really unfortunate if there are people that consider themselves on the left and they're kind of like thumbing their nose at people that served in Afghanistan, unless they're like some general or something like that. Do whatever you want to them. But, you know, somebody that was just on the ground or whatever, yeah. I feel like you do have to engage these people. And also, I mean, let's be honest, like a lot of them are Black, Hispanic, like they're, you know, it's not like some, you know, the guys from these action movies, like it's guys from like the Bronx and, you know, and San Bernardino and, you know, people that you went to high school with. But yeah, I mean, instead of like, yeah, I would just really hope people aren't going that route, because that just doesn't accomplish anything. But if you want to engage them, you know, ask them if they think that, you know, there was a purpose in going there, if they think it was worth it. Was it worth it for them? Do they feel like they did anything good when they were there? And I remember specifically having a conversation. This was probably about 2005 or 6. It was somebody who had served in, I don't think he had been in Afghanistan, but he had been in Iraq. And initially he was saying like, you know, those people killed us and blah, blah, blah. And I'm having a rational conversation with him. I'm like, okay, well, it wasn't Iraqis on the planes for 9/11. Well, yeah, and I'm like, I'm not going to get into all the details. I brought up some different things that happened in the war in Iraq, and we ended up having a conversation. And he admitted to me that, okay, look, we went there for the oil, but we need the oil. Whatever. I would imagine that guy like making that, admitting that to me and to himself, after having this like veneer of patriotism, that would do something for him to know, like, okay, a lot of this stuff is bullshit. Like, it's not real. Like, there's some enemy and there's something you need to be afraid of. Those service members probably know that better than a lot of us. They probably saw the humanity in people in Afghanistan a lot more than somebody here would. They probably had conversations with people. They probably ran across people that they had no idea would speak English or know about different things in American pop culture. They probably had good experiences with just regular people and understand that there's a situation there that they don't fully understand. But they probably also know that they were put in a situation that there's nothing that they could do about it. So I think, we're people that consider ourselves on the left politically, and I think that you should, approach people with kindness in general. I mean, at least that's how I look at things, and have conversations with people, even if, it is some red, white, and blue flag wearing person. Like, ask them about their experience there. A lot of service members, they have a lot of trauma. I can't even imagine being in a war zone. You're paranoid and stressed out the entire time. That conversation that you want to have with them about like the political aspect of it, that could be very therapeutic for them, and they could end up telling you like honest things that they experienced. I went to San Diego State, and it's a military town. I knew a lot of those guys that were in those wars, and they would have some insane stories, and they weren't saying them from some macho point of view. They were like, yeah, dude, it was crazy, and it was scary, and I was terrified. And I felt bad that I had to shoot cows because the guy told us, like, it might have a bomb on it. And I felt bad. Like, so yeah, these people that served on the ground, if you're going to speak with them, have an open mind and, approach them with kindness. But if it's, some general or something like that, get a milkshake.
I'll leave it on there. Parody, and I'll leave it on there. Oh,
no.
Last word, Ben.
Last thing. This is one thing I have to mention. I have to
go for it.
I don't know if maybe your other guest talked about it. Hopefully, if he did, then you can just cut this out. But once again, we are sitting here on the other side of the world. We're hoping that if it ends up the Taliban taking control of Afghanistan, that they have some good sense and they show something better than they have in the past. The Taliban is nothing more than a mercenary force created by the Pakistani intelligence, and hopefully, like they were in Qatar and they were negotiating and stuff, and hopefully they do something decent. And what I really, really hope is that there's no more targeting of the Hazara minority in Afghanistan. There's been so many bombings and targeted killings. Just a few months ago, there was a school for girls that was targeted. I think there was like 100 people killed. It was mostly young girls, like children in school. They targeted the school. I don't know if the Taliban ever took responsibility for that, but it's on their hands no matter what. I hope that these people are not targeted anymore. They are, an ethnic minority in Afghanistan. They're Shia, which is probably another reason why they're targeted, or probably the main reason why they're targeted, because the Taliban is a bunch of extremist idiots. But hopefully, we're hoping that the Taliban, they were sitting there in suits in Qatar. Hopefully they have something in mind something better for Afghanistan and we can see something better in the future, we're hoping for that. And I'm hoping for some sense of security and peace for the Hazara people, because it's really unfortunate what's been happening to them since the Taliban took power and since the Taliban's been creeping back. They're always like one of the first, kind of like easy targets for them when it comes to civilian killings.
Those are all really good points. It sucks. Like a lot of these stories, world news wise, like you have to get used to it. There's not really a great ending. A lot of times the ending or the trajectory is really dark. And like, to be honest, like, yeah, the trajectory coming soon is also like not going to be really like great. There's going to be like more things. Like it's very unlikely. No one really believes the Taliban's word that they're going to run a more like progressive ship in any kind of way. So like it's not looking to be the case, but all we got to do, I think, I like the way that Bam was kind of talking about just a moment ago, that like folks need to be approached with kindness. Individuals need to be approached with kindness, and the actual structures, the military systems, like the United States imperial military system that in the Cold War, along with the Pakistani intelligence, helped to empower the Taliban, essentially, or what would become the Taliban, in their proxy war against Russia. Like these are larger issues. These are larger things that don't fit and don't work in sound bites on the internet or on cable news. But this information is very important, because without it, we can't make like proper decisions. And without it, we can't start with the empathy that is necessary to build meaningful political coalitions that can start to overtake and overpower these destructive systems.
Yeah, it's really funny. I mean, okay, I know we're ending, but I just wonder what I wonder what people think the Taliban really is. They're not like a group of super educated Islamic scholars. It was a mercenary force. That's all it was. It was a mercenary force that grew large, and it's just being puppeted by Pakistan. Like, that's it. It's not some. I mean, everything it's more in the interest of the leaders to keep like the soldiers ignorant. Like, it's more like when you see a lot of these atrocities and stuff, and you're like, damn, how could these people be so extreme and so terrible? Like, doesn't Islam not teach that? Of course, Islam doesn't teach that stuff. But you have people that are, they're ignorant, or they're like, there's like you were talking about, we're talking about the history. Like, there's so many things at play here. Like, I wouldn't want somebody to think that all the people in Afghanistan have the same ideas as the Taliban, or like all the people in Afghanistan are like such extremists when it comes to religion. And not even to think that the Taliban is such extremists when it comes to religion, but they're extremists when it comes to like what they want to accomplish, and they'll do it by any means necessary. That's how it's been in the past. I hope going forward that that's changed. Them dudes were sitting there in Qatar in suits, eating real good. Qatar has a bit of influence on Taliban now. Obviously, Pakistan has some influence. We'll see what goes on. Usually when China kind of gets in there, things kind of calm down. So hopefully, what we've seen in the past goes away, and we just see more Drake dance parties. I thought some of the moves the dude was hitting with his AK, some of the moves were kind of fire. I'd rather him be dancing with the Draco than shooting it.
Again, I will just give you the last word, because I largely agree with that. And it is like truly really important to highlight there. No people, not the people in Afghanistan, not anywhere, are homogenous in their thinking, except for maybe in cable news. That's maybe one place where the people are homogenous in their thinking. There's not even like a color thing. It's black folks, white folks, you name it. No, but Bam, thank you very much for joining me on this decidedly non extremely like homogenous show. Not going to allow you to filibuster, and that's been enough for you. That's enough for today. But we'll do another panel episode. We'll get the boys back together to do some more new shenanigans, especially when we get more towards the Democrats doing tangible work potentially, or at least pretending to do so, when it relates to infrastructure, voting, whatever Joe Biden wants his legacy to be, other than Afghanistan at this point. Anyways, Power Report can be found on Twitter at PowerReportWRLD and on Instagram at PowerReport.world. PowerReport.world is also a URL you can type into your web browser and find all of the links to the show, including how you can find us as a podcast, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, Stitcher, pretty much wherever you listen. Here you can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/DanFromTheUnternet. We're growing. We appreciate you very much. Everyone loves the Bam giving Jimmy Dore smoke videos. Everyone loves the me giving Jimmy Dore smoke videos. As soon as if that fucker keeps talking, I will keep spilling. I've got more ammunition than he wants to deal with. So let's go, buddy. But that being said, I don't want to talk about drama, and I'd also like to just talk about substantive issues and just friendship and love and things like that. This has been Power Report episode 30. Appreciate you very much. We'll be back soon. Take care.